So my grandfather actually had this experience where he was in this deep meditation in one of Neville Goddard's VIP meetings. And he actually took his skin off. He actually removed his skin off in deep meditation. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're getting back into Out of This World by Neville Goddard. This is chapter 3, The Power of Imagination. And in this chapter, Neville Goddard actually goes into how he would stay in these meditative states for long periods of time. And he actually proved it to himself by actually putting it into application form using his imagination, where he stayed for hours imagining himself to be other than that which his reason and his senses dictated, until the imagined states were as vivid as reality. And in this chapter, Neville Goddard actually gives a method or a formula of how you can actually start applying this in your life and actually creating a vision of your future and creating that vision in your mind, in your imagination, and playing out a short movie clip and creating this movie and making it so real in your imagination that it actually comes into fruition as an objective fact in your 3D reality. All right, so we're going to begin the chapter here with a verse out of the Bible. That's John chapter 8:32. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Men claim that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates. This means that if I, while imprisoned, suggested to myself that I am free and succeeded in believing that I am free, it is true that I believe in my freedom, but it does not follow that I am free, for I may be the victim of illusion. But because of my own experiences, because of Neville's own experiences, he has come to believe in so many strange things that I see little reason to doubt the truth of things that are beyond my experience. The ancient teachers warned us not to judge from appearances because, said they, the truth need not conform to the external reality to which it relates. So all through the Bible, the ancient teachers and the verses from the Bible are warning us and telling us not to judge from appearances of your 3D world, because the truth need not conform to your external reality to which it relates. And this is also really important because the ancient teachers also claimed and warned us that if we bore false witness, if we imagined evil against another, that no matter how real our belief appears to be, how truly it conforms to the external reality to which it relates, if it does not make free the one of whom we hold the belief, it is untrue and therefore a false judgment. So you always imagine the best of everyone in your current reality, no matter if they appear to be bad or they're not doing the things that you want them to do. You always imagine that they are doing and they are successful. So you always have this inner dialogue going, and it will be a true judgment then. Otherwise, you're imagining evil against that person. So therefore, it will be a false judgment. So we are called upon to deny the evidence of our senses and to imagine as true of our neighbor that which makes him free. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. To know the truth of our neighbor, we must assume that he is already that which he desires to be. Any concept we hold of another that is short of his fulfilled desire will not make him free, and therefore cannot be the truth. Instead of learning my craft in schools, where attending courses and seminars is considered a substitute for self-acquired knowledge, my schooling was devoted almost exclusively to the power of imagination. I stayed for hours imagining myself to be other than that which my reason and my senses dictated, until the imagined states were vivid as reality. So vivid that the passerby became but a part of my imagination and acted as I would have them. So he's manipulating his reality with his imagination, because imagination is the real world, okay? Everything is projected from inside of you out into the 3D reality, which is a hologram. Because in your imagination, you can create anything that you want. You can create, the passerbys, like what Neville Goddard said here. You can create other people to do exactly what you want them to do in this imaginal scene that you have created. And if you live within this imaginal scene, creating it just the way that you want, and you create it and you run it and you loop it over and over and over and over in your imagination until it becomes a solidly real reality to you, then it has to happen in your 3D world. And that's what Neville Goddard is talking about here. So by the power of imagination, Neville Goddard's fantasy led theirs and dictated them their behavior and the discourse they held together while he was identified with his imagined state. This actually reminds me of an experience that my grandfather had that he shared with me a very long time ago. And that was when he had an outer body experience, because we're all the collective consciousness. We're just in this body, in this ego, connected to this single entity of a body. But when you release that, when you can get outside of that, you connect to everything, which is consciousness. It's non-dual, actually. It's really non-dual. It's only one source, which is all consciousness. So my grandfather actually had this experience where he was in this deep meditation in one of Neville Goddard's VIP meetings. And he actually took his skin off. He actually removed his skin off in deep meditation, and he removed it like it was clothing. And then he went outside of his body, and he said he flew into the wall, and then he went inside of a clock, and then he moved from the clock and then became the building itself. And then he was looking at the city of Los Angeles, and then he became the city of Los Angeles. And then he became the world. Then he became the universe. Then he became all consciousness. So then he was attached as one, and he felt that energy. He felt the energy of being one with all consciousness. So he lost his ego. And at that point, you are in that God state. And that's what Neville Goddard is talking about here. He's staying in these imaginal acts, completely egoless, and he's identified with the imaginal act, which is actually him outside of his body manipulating consciousness itself, because he's detached himself and has now become like an imaginal act. But the imagination is the only real reality that there is. Everything is projected from inside of you, and this hologram of a three-dimensional space is just coming from within all of us, being projected out. And we're actually experiencing this consciousness, or this form of consciousness, with our five senses. So the only real reality that there is your imagination. And imagination is connected to consciousness and the God state. And when you're in this God state, what you'll find is, because I've been there, I've done this actually when I was in prison, I would go into these deep meditations where I spent 175 days actually in solitary confinement, where I did meditation after meditation, I'm talking 18 hours a day, going into these deep meditations where I was connecting with this God consciousness, where I was releasing my ego, and I would actually go outside of myself and plug into consciousness, and like where time doesn't really exist. Like time doesn't exist how you see it now when you connect to consciousness and this God state. And what I would plug in, and I would get all this information like instantly, from this God state, and it would tell me, and then that's where I got the answers, like where everything was created, or how it was created, and what consciousness is, and how everything is connected, and everything just like happened, and I was just plugged in, and everything was just downloaded in my mind for this like fraction of a second. Everything just downloaded in my mind in this deep meditation. And what I found was, with the God state, you no longer desire anything. You don't have any more desire in this God state, even though you can create anything that you want at this point, and you're connected to God. You are God in this state, but you no longer have desire to change anything. And you realize that everything is fine just the way that it is, and everything is working out for you perfectly all the time. And you realize that in this God state. So if you're searching for this God state, what you'll find is, when you get there, you're no longer going to have the desires that you had when you were searching for the God state. But another part of this, when I was connected to consciousness and I downloaded all this information, one thing that I found was the creation of it. And it showed me as God, or everyone watching this video, it showed all of us as one, creating this space in this hologram, and then erasing it, and then creating it to where when we enter this hologram, we erase our memory. We don't remember that we actually were the ones that created it, but we designed it this way to experience life and to have desire. So you're not really supposed to know these things. You're not supposed to go to the God state, because then you don't have desire anymore. And it was created with this ego. You're supposed to have this ego. You're supposed to have this experience of life, and to live a fulfilled life, and think that you live and then you die, and then you have kids, and then you have a family, and you do all these things. It was designed this way by you. You designed it this way, and then you erased your memory of entering the hologram, or this high-tech simulated game. And when I downloaded all this information, it just happened, and I saw everything in this split second of how it was created. but it is designed for you to be limited. Because if you were unlimited, you wouldn't have any desire to create anything, because you wouldn't know the difference between good and bad. You wouldn't know the difference between pain and happiness. You wouldn't know the difference between those two. They wouldn't matter to you anymore. You wouldn't have the desire to change anything. But in your current human state, you have desire, you have things that you want, but the trick is to use your imagination to create those things. Not to go back to the God state and no longer have desire, but still have desire and balance yourself in between selflessness and with the ego, and control the ego, live a fulfilling life, help others, do the right things, create a fulfilling life and experience, and then try to share the knowledge with as many people as you possibly can. But I think connecting with that God state just for that split second, I think everyone should actually experience that if they can handle something like that, to actually experience this God state and then understand that you created this world to experience a life and to experience love and to experience relationships and to experience being an entrepreneur or running a business or just living, and enjoying the journey of life. And then it's self-sustainable. Like it was designed, with the balance that we live in with hot and cold, pain and pleasure. That way it would be self-sustainable. And that's the way it was created by you. You created that way. It wouldn't need an energy supply. It wouldn't need like a battery backup or any, gasoline to run. But the important thing to understand is that you designed this to be happy. And if you're living a life where you're not happy doing what you're doing and you're focused on the past instead of a vision of the future, that's not what it was designed for. And there's nothing to fear. There's no fear of death. I mean, when I downloaded this information, when you die, you don't really die. You go into another body. You go back into consciousness, the collective consciousness, and then based on what your level of consciousness was, you will enter another body or another entity of some kind, depending on where you were and what you accomplished in your life and what level of consciousness that you have. So the best thing you could do now is try to increase your level of consciousness, try to evolve as much as possible, because when you die, you will enter another body, but it depends on what level of consciousness you have when you die and what body you're going to enter. So you're going to enter another body with that same level of consciousness that's going to be around the age of about 20 years old, where you're going to connect to this new body where you have parents. So if you have a high level of consciousness and you've been studying Buddhism and you've been doing meditation your entire life and you have a really high level of awareness, then you're going to travel into another body of around 20 with a person that was trained by their parents with the same sort of awareness and teaching of consciousness. That way, when you connect to that being, you're gonna have one step up. You're not gonna remember your past life, but you're gonna connect to it through awareness of consciousness, because you had that level of awareness in your previous life, and now you're connecting to another entity or another body or another being with has been trained similar to your past body that you were in. But you're gonna connect with that awareness. So there's a lot of variables that go along with that. But it also could keep in mind that people that don't evolve, that don't provide value to the world, they don't increase their level of consciousness, they actually lower it, they will most likely travel into something that has a lower level of consciousness, almost like an insect or a bird or a reptile or something like that, because everything is a form of consciousness within the hologram. So those sort of people with a low level of awareness and consciousness may travel back into, an insect or something like that. All right, so I know I went a little bit off topic from reading the book, but when Neville Goddard started talking about this, how he spent hours imagining and then connecting with all consciousness, and then creating his own reality within consciousness and identifying himself with his imagination, that is exactly the same thing that I experienced and the same thing my grandfather experienced. So I wanted to share that, because Neville Goddard doesn't get into that exactly, but his visions and everything that he experienced is real, and that everything that he was able to create and everything he was able to obtain in his life was all based on this. And he says it right here perfectly. Man's imagination is the man himself. So your imagination is the real world, okay? So, and the world as imagination sees it is the real world. But it is our duty to imagine all that is lovely and of good report, increasing your awareness. Okay. That's what he's talking about. Increasing your awareness, increasing your level of consciousness, because the Bible is telling us this, because when you die, just like when I plugged into consciousness, I saw all of these things. I saw everything. Like for that split second, it was just a quick download. I saw everything. Okay. So when you die, you travel into another form of some kind, depending on your level of consciousness. So the Bible is telling us this in Philippians 4:8. It said, it is your duty to imagine all that is lovely and of good report. Okay, so you're not going to, if you are a good person, if you have integrity and moral value, you're doing the right things, you have a high level of awareness and integrity in providing value to consciousness, then you're going to go into another body, another evolved body with high awareness. But if you're doing the opposite things, you're doing evil things, you're imagining the worst in everyone, then you're going to travel into a lower life form, an insect, a fish, any other form of consciousness that is lesser without the use of imagination, okay? Because you have a gift right now as a human being to be able to create and think or observe your thoughts. All the other beings on the planet do not have the ability that you have right now. You have the ability to manipulate your imagination and actually visualize a vision of the future and create those things and make it vividly real in your imagination. So use these talents that you have, because these other beings don't have that ability. And if you lose that, if you don't apply that, if you don't use that in your current human state and increase your awareness, then you're going to travel back down into something else that doesn't even have that ability. So keep that in mind, to use this and to understand that imagination creates reality, and you have that ability to create anything that you want in your life and to live a proper life. And it's explaining this in the Bible over and over and over and over. So for the Lord seeth not as man seeth. The Lord seeth not as the man seeth. So fifth dimension, time, space. Okay, so for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Samuel 16:7. Okay, your level of consciousness. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That is your moral value, your integrity. What is in your heart? Okay, what you honestly believe about yourself. Okay, Proverbs 23:7. In meditation, when the brain grows luminous, I find myself endowed with the magnetic power to attract to me whatsoever I desire. Desire is the power of imagination uses to fashion life about me as I fashion it within myself. So imagination is part of what you created when you developed this hologram or this high-tech simulated game. That's what's creating and spinning consciousness and creating. Is from within you. So what you imagine, what you picture in your mind, that's what's creating everything in your 3D reality. Because if you notice, like deja vu, have you ever had deja vu where you see something, you're like, oh, I've been here before, or I've seen this before. That's because you did. That means you were unconscious of what you were picturing before you got there, or it was the day before or the week before. You actually pictured that in your imagination and created that in your mind to happen. Unconsciously, you just don't remember it. But when you get there, you're like, oh, I see this picture. It's the same picture I saw in my imagination a week ago. That's because you created that in your imagination unconsciously. And that's the same, because imagination creates reality. It's being pushed out. It's you pushed out everything that you're imagining. So you have to be very careful of your thoughts, of your moods, of your inner dialogues, because thoughts create these images in your mind. So if you have negative thoughts, you're imaging negative things, and then that's being projected into your reality. Then you're shifting to different parallel realities based on that, either up or down. You're moving based on your thoughts and your images and your feeling states, into this different world. So be very careful of your thoughts and your moods, because the infinite realities that are within the hologram are all part of the hologram. So there's an infinite amount of versions of you. There's an infinite amount of versions of me that are shifting constantly within the hologram itself. And that is also spinning it and creating it and balancing it all at the same exact time. So depending on what you're imagining and your feeling states, those worlds you're constantly shifting in. You're constantly shifting in the hologram, in the high-tech simulated game, to these different parallel realities, the infinite realities that are parallel to itself. And that's like with ghosts. Like people talk about, I want to bring this up. I've been wanting to bring this up because I get this a lot, about ghosts. Like there's a lot of people out there that say they saw a ghost. Okay. A ghost there are no ghosts in the hologram. It doesn't exist. What that is it's an interlap point or an intercept point from two parallel realities that have intercepted from one another, and you got a glimpse of another being that appears to be a ghost, like in your house. Like, for example, like say your great grandfather died in this house, and then somebody sees your great grandfather, be like, oh, and they're like, oh, that's the ghost of great grandpa. That's his ghost. Okay, right there, that's his ghost. But really, it's not. Okay, that is because there's an infinite amount of versions of your great grandfather, and in one of those realities, he's still alive. And that's the reality that has intercepted your reality, because the parallel realities it intercepted, and he was able to see you just as much as you were able to see him in that instant moment. So there are no ghosts. Ghosts don't exist. Those are intercept points of the parallel reality within the hologram. But it's a multi-billion-dollar business in the hologram itself. So there's like movies that are made, horror movies with ghosts everywhere, and all these different things, like Halloween Horror Nights, all these different things that are going on that are based on ghosts and scary things. So there's a big business based on this, and a lot of the people already know these things, but they just use that for their business to make money. All right, so here's Neville Goddard, and he's explaining the application form of creating anything that you want, or how he does it with his imagination, and then anyone can do this. This is actually the formula to create anything you want based on your level of visualization, your ability to focus on one thing and control the unconscious mind, which is your body, and connecting the body and the mind, the muscle of the body and the mind together, and focusing on one thing and visualizing something persistently, and then creating that into your reality. This is what he explains here. I first desire to see a certain person or scene, and then I look as though I were seeing that which I want to see. So he's creating that in his imagination. He's creating what he wants to see. He's desiring something, then he's creating what he wants to see, and the imagined state becomes objectively real. Okay, so he's staying within this scene because he's got a very developed imagination, from a lot of experience that he has, because Neville was a vaudeville dancer. By his career, he was a vaudeville dancer. So he had the mind-body connection. So he, just like playing an instrument or something like that, that's developing the mind, he had a well-developed mind to focus on one thing and to visualize. So he was able to do this. So over and over and over, be persistent in staying in your imagined scene. That's what makes it real. Okay, that's what makes it real to you, and that's what creates it as a reality. And then it's pushed out, and then it's created in the hologram space itself. So, and then the imagined state becomes objectively real. So he desires to hear, and then he listens as though he were hearing. And the imagined voice speaks that which he dictated as though it had initiated the message. So he's making the future now. He's creating that and activating the positron, which Richard Feynman won the Nobel Prize on, creating the positron shocking time sense, making the future now, making it real, and then it's being pushed out, and it's him being pushed out from imagination into the high-tech simulated game or the hologram. And then Neville Goddard says right here, I could give you many examples to prove my arguments, but to prove that these imagined states do become physical realities. But I know that my examples will awaken in all who have not met the like, or who are not inclined towards my arguments. So basically, a lot of people want to find error in something. They don't want to believe in something. They just want to pick it apart. So what he's saying here is, it doesn't matter whether he demonstrates this and shows you, everyone exactly how to do this, and gives you like 100% evidence that it works. There's still going to be the people that'll be like, no, that doesn't work. There's something wrong here, or you did that wrong, or you misspelled that word, or so, they're going to want to find something. If someone is inclined to an argument, that's that state that they're in. That's the current state that person is in, and they're not going to believe no matter what you do. And basically what he's saying is, try to prove him wrong, just like my grandfather did when my grandfather went to see him about imagination creates reality. And my grandfather's like, this guy's off his rocker. He's a nut job. But I'm going to go ahead and try to prove this guy wrong, because, so my grandfather went really out of his way, did the ladder exercise, ended up climbing the ladder. And then he realized that it works and all these things. So use it yourself. Prove him wrong. I mean, if you want to say that this doesn't work, or, oh, this is BS or whatever, try it yourself. Imagine something while you're falling asleep. And if you can't visualize, work on your visualization skills, because that's going to help you in all aspects of your life, just to learn how to visualize anyway, even if you don't want to do it. Learn how to visualize, learn how to control your mind, and learn how to focus. And that will help you in all facets of life, in every aspect of your life. Learning how to focus on one thing for long periods of time, whether you want to imagine your dream life and create it that way or not, it's going to help you. It's absolutely going to help you create, success in your life anyways. All right. So Neville Goddard continues here. For I have in intense meditation called things that were not seen as though they were, and the unseen not only became seen, but eventually became physical realities. So that's straight from the Bible, and Neville Goddard is testing that and proving that that is real, and you can also do that. I have done that. My grandfather's done that. I know hundreds of people that have done that, and it's worked. So by this method, first desiring and then imagining that we are experiencing that which we desire to experience, we can mold the future in harmony with our desire. But let us follow the advice of the prophet and think only the lovely and the good. For the imagination waits on us as indifferently and as swiftly when our nature is evil as when it is good. From us spring forth good and evil. I have set before thee this day life and death and evil. Deuteronomy 30:15. Desire and imagination are the enchanter's wand of fable, and they draw to themselves their own affinities. They break forth best when the mind is in a state akin to sleep. So when you're not completely conscious, but you're not unconscious. So this state akin to sleep is when you're in this completely relaxed state, as most of you already know. When you're in this state where you're not asleep, but you're not awake, you're right in the middle, and then you have control of the direction of your attention within this. And that's the most susceptible point to impress the subconscious mind with your imaginal act in your mind. Okay, so I have written with some care and detail the method I use to enter the dimensionally larger world, but I shall give you one more formula for opening the door of the larger world. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men and sealeth their instructions. Job 33:15-16. In dream, we are usually the servant of our vision rather than its master. But the internal fantasy of dream can be turned into an external reality. In dream, as in meditation, we slip from this world into a dimensionally larger world. And I know that the forms in dream are not flat two-dimensional images, which modern psychologists believe them to be. They are substantial realities of the dimensionally larger world, and I can lay hold of them. I have discovered that if I surprise myself dreaming, I can lay a hold of an inanimate or stationary form of the dream, a chair, a table, a stairway, a tree, and command to awake. While firmly holding on the object of the dream, I am pulled through myself with the distinct feeling of awakening from dream. I awaken in another sphere, holding the object of my dream, to find that I am no longer the servant of my vision, but its master. For I am fully conscious and in control of the movements of my attention. It is in this fully conscious state, when we are in control of the direction of thought, that we call things that are not seen as though they were. In this state, we call things by wishing and assuming the feeling of our wish fulfilled. Unlike the world of three dimensions, where there is an interval between our assumption and its fulfillment, in the dimensionally larger world, there is an immediate realization of our assumption. The external reality instantly mirrors our assumption. Here there is no need to wait 4 months until the harvest. See John 4:35. We look again as though we saw, and lo and behold, the fields are already white to harvest. In this dimensionally larger world, ye shall not need to fight. Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you. Chronicles 20:17. And because that greater world is slowly passing through our three-dimensional world, we can, by the power of imagination, mold our world in harmony with our desire. Look as though you saw. Listen as though you heard. Stretch forth your imaginary hand as though you touched, and your assumption will harden into facts. To those who believe that a true judgment must conform to the external reality to which it relates, This will be foolishness and a stumbling block. 1 Corinthians 1:23. But I preach and practice the fixing in consciousness and that which man desires to realize. Experience convinces me that fixed attitudes of mind which do not conform to the external reality to which they relate and are therefore called imaginary. Things which are not will nevertheless bring to naught things that are. Corinthians 1:28. I do not wish to write a book of wonders, but rather to turn man's mind back to the one and only reality that the ancient teachers worshipped as God. All that was said of God was in reality said of man's consciousness. So we may say that according as it is written, he that glorieth, let him glory in his own consciousness. 1 Corinthians 1:31, 2 Corinthians 10:17, 18. But let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, that I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. Jeremiah 9:24. No man needs help to direct him in the application of this law of consciousness. I am is the self-definition of the absolute, the root out of which everything grows. I am the vine, John 15:1, 15:5. What is your answer to the eternal question, who am I? Your answer determines the part you play in the hologram, in the high-tech simulated game. Your answer to that question, who am I, determines the part you will play in the hologram, in this high-tech simulated game that you're living in right now, this three-dimensional world. Your answer, that is your concept of yourself, your identity, your personality, that is what determines the part you will play in this hologram. Need not conform to the external reality to which it relates. This truth is revealed in the statements, let the weak man say, I am strong. Joel 3:10. Look back over the good resolutions with which many past New Years are encumbered. They lived a little while and then they died. Why? Because they were severed from their root. Assume that you are that which you want to be. Change your identity. Change your concept of yourself. Experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh, where you're already that which you want to be. Change your conception of yourself and imagine that. Live in that. Experience that as if it was real right now. Remain faithful to your assumption so that you define yourself as that which you have assumed. Things have no life if they are severed from their roots, and our consciousness, our I amness, is the root of all that springs in our world. If we believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your sins, John 8:24. That is, if I do not believe that I am already that which I desire to be, then I remain as I am, and I die in my present concept of self. There is no power outside of the consciousness of man to resurrect and make alive that which man desires to experience. That man who is accustomed to call up at will whatever images he pleases will be, by virtue of the power of his imagination, master of his world, master of his fate. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. John 11:25. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. All right, everyone, that is the end of this video. I know I went off topic a little bit, but if there's any of those topics that I covered in this video that you are interested in me speaking more about and talking with you more about and creating more videos about, go ahead and let me know in the column box below. And don't forget to give me one thing you are grateful for. Any other content you want me to cover in the future, go ahead and leave that in the column box below. I love you guys, and I will see you in the next one.
Theory. Well, mine is not theory. I go into these states